Almost live. There we go.
Good
Hello,
morning.
everybody. Good morning. Welcome to
Um,
Goddess Matters. We are here today with our wonderful guest, Dr. Safron Rossi. Hello, Dr. Safron.
Hi.
So today we're going to be talking about the what we're calling the hidden archetype, the hidden goddess or the hidden archetype. Saffron is going to illuminate what that is for us. And so a little bit about Saffron before we dive into the conversation. She is a professor in the Jungian and Archetypal Psychology program at Pacifica Graduate Institute. She's also an archetypal astrologer, and she's also the author of the most recent book. The book we'll be focusing on today, or the content inside the book we'll be focusing on, The Kore Goddess, or Kori Goddess, A Mythology and Psychology. Dun, da, da, da. And some of you may also know that Saffron also was the editor of this book, The Goddesses, Mysteries of the Feminine Divine. So I just wanted to string those two pieces together to give people a fuller context of your work. So, okay,
Awesome.
finally, welcome. And oh, yes, and everybody at home, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. We'll be with you here in the live chat. So we'll be happy to interact with you. Okay. And Andrea, would you like to get us started?
oh, sure, absolutely. Well, hi, Saffron. It's great to see you again, and a lot of fun to be here with you to discuss your book and this idea. Before we came on, I said it really is has such an intersection with the work that I do, and maybe you could kind of give us a little bit of an overview of kind of what the book is about, and then also the perspective that you come to it with depth psychology. And
Mhm.
I know that those could be full hour answers each, but just to kind of orient us to the conversation, because
Right.
the whole idea of Kore as the hidden archetype, as the one in self, I think a lot of women are going to resonate with that
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
terms of what they're trying to do and recreate and everything in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book in a simple way is a study of a particular archetypal pattern, which is the pattern of the Kore, which is the Greek word for virgin or maiden. And this is a very significant archetypal pattern that we see reflected in myths all across the globe, and by extension within the psyche. You know, the Jungian, to maybe step back for a moment and put this within the context of a Jungian psychology, which is one of the streams that belongs to the larger field that we would refer to as depth psychology. Depth psychology, maybe in the simplest senses, psychological theories that recognize and see as primary the presence of the unconscious. So, by depth, what we're meaning is the unconscious, what is below our sort of conscious, waking, rational uh, perspective. So there are many different streams. You know, there's Freudian psychology, Jungian psychology, archetypal psychology. All of those belong to this larger depth tradition. Um, and from the Jungian perspective, and this strongly informs, of course, archetypal psychology as well, is that the figures that we find in the mythic and religious traditions from time immemorial of human civilization and culture are actually expressions of these deep, abiding principles that shape life. That the psyche is the psyche is patterned and structured along these rhythms of nature. That's to me, that's one of the most powerful analogies for the archetypes. They are the patterns of nature moving through life, and myth and religion and human cultural manifestation express those patterns in images and in stories. So this book, my work, was an exploration of one particular archetypal pattern, being the Kore or the Virgin. And you've already, both of you have made the sort of reference to the hidden archetype, and I think my sense of what you're pointing to and saying that about the Kore is the way that in an interesting way, in Jungian psychology, Jung named the Kore as a psychological pattern as one of the most significant in the lives and psyches of women, because it both has a power that is equivalent to the mother archetype, which of course has been profoundly significant for the whole of human existence. And it's also an image of the self. And by self, he would often differentiate that with a capital S, meaning or referring to the inner divinity, the inner divine image that is both the center point and the driving dynamic process of our individuation or kind of ensoulment into life. And even though Jung named the Kore, Virgin, Maiden, as so profoundly significant in these ways, it's very, very little of that has been explored in the history of Jungian psychology. There are individuals who have done that, and in my book, I draw that out, really just trying to give us a kind of breadcrumb trail and a history, a kind of and a lit review of, well, where has she appeared in the literature? But in many ways, she's been hidden. And so my work was also a desire to acknowledge Jung and those that have talked about the Kore, and to try to draw that out into the light, both from the tradition of depth psychology, but also in myth and in art and in literature. Where, how, who, what does she look like? And how do we connect to that? That's my little like elevator speech, I suppose, around the book.
It's the thing that is so engaging, I think, about your work and about looking at Kore and talking about it in terms of this field of depth psychology, is that these ideas and these concepts are not abstract. That the idea of the archetype of the Kore and how it's constellated in the feminine psyche, that we can actually draw on that archetypal pattern, that we can activate that we can use that to reclaim ourselves and better understand ourselves. That what you're talking about in the book, and I suggest that any woman who is looking to reclaim herself or figure out who she is really, the book is so easy reading and so understandable that maybe you could speak a little bit to how these ideas and these concepts from this field of psychology are actually active principles that we can use in our lives.
Right. Well, I mean, if we were to, so I think the first thing that sort of underscores everything from this approach is the recognition that myths are metaphors for psychological experience. They are kind of poetic renderings of what happens in the inner world of the psyche. So if we're thinking in that way, if we're approaching myth from that sort of lens of interpretation, then the Kore goddess and Kore figures who are virgins. Now that's what Kore means. And so if we listen with a metaphorical ear to virginity rather than a biological, or physical, literal way of thinking about what it is to be virgin. The metaphor of what it is to be virgin is to be unto oneself, that one is undivided from oneself. And we can then amplify that and recognize, and this partly is very much connected to the work of one of the first generation women analysts and scholars, Esther Harding, who is amazing. And in her work on her book, published in 1935, was Women's Mysteries, Ancient and Modern. She really drew out what I refer to as like the wide stream of the virgin archetype, and looked at virgin goddesses in ancient mythologies. And one of the things that she makes very, very clear is that virgin goddesses, one of the key themes that we see is sovereignty. So sovereignty is another amplification, we might say, of this metaphor of virginity or chorehood. What do we mean by sovereignty? I mean, Andrea, this is your field, but it means to bear it. When we're talking about goddesses, it means that they bear their divinity in their own right. And if we're listening into that more on the individual psychological level, to be sovereign is to bear our inner reality. And so the chore, or the virgin, as a psychological reality, is related to the ways in which we are in relationship to our the essential truth and ground of our being, that we relate to ourselves and life from a sense of being unto oneself, right?
So could you just talk a little bit about the difference between the meaning of virgin as we understand it culturally and as
Right.
it's understood in ancient Greece, in mythic culture?
Well, I mean, those are different things because, of course, in Greek culture, even ancient Greek culture, that, to be virgin meant to be chaste, to not have been wed. I mean, there are all these very sort of concrete ways that it was understood, much in the way that we would define it today. But for me, the move is to hear the metaphor rather than to be caught in the more literal, biological, even developmental fantasy about what it is to be virgin. Just like, I mean, maybe a way to connect this for people is, when a woman becomes a mother, it's like she's going to be a mother forever, even after her children are adults and are gone. That connection to that whole field of experience of what it is to care for another, what it is to always be attuned to another's needs, that deep kind of primal instinct toward protecting and nurturing and taking care of another, that lives on, whether that's something that's actually being like actively done, at a stage of life. Same thing. So the corollary there is that to be virgin, pardon me, is a kind of quality of, it's a quality of being that is distinct from the ways we might inhabit that as a young woman or not, right? It's a style of consciousness. It's a set of values and principles. And we can, same thing as if we talk about the hero or, the trickster. Yeah, the virgin is among these absolutely central sort of archetypal patterns and principles.
Yeah, I think what I really appreciated reading your book is seeing through that lens that virgin is applicable at any stage in a woman's life, regardless of her biological age.
That's right.
regardless of her physiological stage of, an actual sexual and it really doesn't have much to do with virginity or sexuality at all. And I really wanted us to have this conversation because what I see happening in the pop cultural or goddess pop cultural conversation about the virgin goddesses is this emphasis on the virgin goddesses and sexuality. And
Mm,
there's actually a missing link there with the psychological
right.
wholeness, which you're bringing forth. And so I think that's a very important point to kind of belabor here.
Yeah,
This,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I
I
totally,
just,
and I think that's why the metaphorical ear is really the crucial link, because if we are looking at myth as poetic expressions of these values of the psyche, then it opens up and we can begin to think about, well, what is it to be virgin? What is it to be unto oneself? What are ways in which I undo that? Or what are ways in which I actually practice that, even as I am deeply committed to my partner or to my children or to my students?
yeah, absolutely.
So chastity, see, I think what you're talking about is the way um, chastity and our whether Judeo-Christian Western cultural background comes into this, the whole notion of purity and the way that clicks into this. I mean, we have to kind of decouple that from the way that we're trying to understand this as a style of being and a whole set of values that are available to us at any time. Now,
Can I just
oh
quote
yeah,
something
yeah,
from your
yeah,
book? Can I quote something from your book that I
yeah,
think is
yeah, please.
great? Because one of the things that I think is awesome about what you do in the book is you bring together the idea of the virgin, the maiden, and you kind of encapsulate them in the idea of Kore, right?
Yeah.
Kind of redefine them. And in the introduction, you write, and I think this is brilliant, you write, thus we could say it is the function of the Kore to safeguard us from losing ourselves to collective forces by turning us inward, shining a light on the psychological task both women and men now face. The Kore asks, how do we make a place for ourselves within ourselves that is inviolable,
Mhm.
virginal?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. See, so another, if we were to think about, well, what is the um, interiority, and that turning toward our inner world in order to be in touch with that, that would be the direction that the Kore draws us into. And interiority is a dimension of the Kore archetype, in the sense of, um, if we are undivided from ourselves, then we are really embodied within ourselves. So again, that's that metaphorical move, that to be virgin has something to do with being deeply in touch with the inner depths that on some level, at some boundary point, whatever that might be, um, is ours alone,
Mm,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And that's that sense of the inviolable, like,
Yeah.
and and I think that it's a huge question in our day and age, given the incredible forces that we all navigate, which are attempting to sell us and capture our attention and make us want this and that and to be like this and that. There's so much power in the external draw of ourselves out of ourselves, especially in our Western culture, that our relationship to the Kore has something to do with our capacity to be in integrity with ourselves and to actually um, resist, like resist that those outward external, exteriorizing, performative pressures that
Mhm.
we all, I think, struggle with on some level. And so
Yeah.
the core, I think, is very much alive in us in the very places where we are struggling to figure out the right balance,
Yeah.
Right.
because she personifies whatever that feeling in our body or that voice or the exhaustion at the end of the day that says, what is what is deeply my own and essential to me.
Mhm.
That's her presence, however it is that we feel that. um and I just think that that's a huge concern, a huge thing we're all grappling with.
Yeah, and that's just the importance of the book and the discussion we're having. Zeph in the chat says, so the original meaning of virgin was actually independent slash autonomous? It's a question.
Well, we the images of virgin goddesses show us that to be a virgin goddess meant to be sovereign and of one's own, and that virgin goddesses, like, as Annalisa could of course speak to, Inanna, or Hera or Isis, these goddesses that do have relational dimensions. They have partners, they have consorts, they have children, but that at their core, goddesses who also had a virgin side, that was the fundamental ground of their potency or power. And so to be virgin in this sense is really equivalent to what it is to be sovereign.
Yeah.
And it's Harding that really draws this out. And she says, virgin, like, contrary to what we, have to also kind of undo in our thinking, coming from a Judeo-Christian, goddessless mode of imagining, really, and tradition, is that goddesses in many of these ancient traditions were not just feminine counterparts of male gods. Like, they were like derivative, just female versions. Hera is not just a female version of Zeus. Isis is not, just a female version of Osiris. That very misguided interpretation has a lot to do with the Judeo-Christian frame that has a male god as the center of it all, and then of course Eve created from Adam's rib, this whole sort of derivative fantasy. That isn't the case in pre-patriarchal mythologies and religions. So, in recognizing that and being able to go back into the history and to see that, we're able to connect with a much wider, deeper understanding of what the metaphor of virgin points to. And that then helps us keep amplifying it and opening it up to then be connected to such themes that I write about in the book: individuality, autonomy, integrity, right? These can then become part of, we could say, the constellation of themes that seem to emerge out of this sort of archetypal pulse of nature
Yeah. Yeah,
in
and you
us.
expand it in the book so well with the different goddesses that you go through, and even looking at different women figures in history
Right.
who have exemplified in one way or another those attributes.
I also want to go back just to the Greek pantheon for a second, because
Yeah.
the Kori is an actual like figure within the kind of
Right.
Ancient Greek mythos. And I'm curious to know what drew you to speak about the Kori specifically instead of other virgin goddesses like Artemis or Athena. I know that they get woven in. Is it because
Right.
the Kori is the pillar within which all of these goddesses kind of arise out of? Is that how you would situate it for yourself?
Right. Okay. So Well, one of the reasons why, rather than so there are a few things I want to say. I wanted to refer to this archetype as the Kore rather than the Virgin, partly because of the linguistic issues that we meet up with, and the way Virgin has this very biological, concrete, it's like that fantasy just cracks open, and there are all these images that we have, and I wanted to um, move our imagining in a slightly different way. So that's why I decided, and of course, maiden, I mean, that word in our English language, whew, that's like loaded. I mean, it has been used in such brutally dismissive ways. And interestingly enough, though, one of these first generation Jungian women that really, in many ways, my work would not have emerged had it not been for my discovery, is Jane Hollister Wheelwright. And she gave a lecture back in 1984 on the Maiden. And when I was the curator at Opus Archives, which has her collection, as well as Joseph Campbell's and Maria Gimbutas and James Hillman, I discovered her lecture because it had never been published or turned into any written material. She traces the Indo-European root maiden to its Indo-European root to Mag, M-A-G, which means to have power. So even, the deep imagining of maiden is a powerful, also virgin Kore, but the word is the word is tricky. So that was the first thing that I wanted to say, like, why the Kore, trying to shift even the way that we hold this whole image and fantasy of virgin, and the way language can help us do that. So that was one piece. Now, Annalisa, you're totally right. In the Greek mythic tradition, some of the most important goddesses, or the goddesses that belong to the Olympian pantheon, are all virgins. Hestia, Artemis, Athena, virgin goddesses. But Persephone was the Kore in the Greek imagination. And in the mythic tradition, the cult tradition, she was even called the Kore, and that was her name until she, well, there was a Persephone before in Sicily, before maybe the classical Homeric Persephone that we know, but maybe a conversation for another time. But I felt that I needed to talk about Persephone, not so much because of my attempt to revitalize and help sort of reimagine Kore, but because Persephone as a figure is an extraordinary, complex portrait of these various, we could say, dimensions that I think women feel an enormous connection to. And somehow Persephone embodies it in the drama of her story, because she's both daughter to Demeter. And so she gives us an incredible portrait of the archetypal daughter and all of the blessings and shadow pieces that come with that way of that inhabiting that sort of perspective, inhabiting that archetypal world, so to speak, which as women, we all know something about. Persephone then becomes consort to, like a lover, a beloved. So she shows us something of that transition, the rupture even from daughterhood to partnerhood and everything that comes with that. And yet, because of her annual journey from underworld to upper world and the sort of fluctuating rhythm, what is it that is the center point that coheres all of this movement and flux and flow and changes, let's say, in identity and relational configurations that her myth shows us? It's her chorehood. And so Persephone is a powerful archetypal image for the way in which, when we are in touch with the essential truth and ground and beingness that is our essence, it's that place. It's that
It holds the
state,
center. It holds the center.
the
Right?
center, that state of indwelling out of our center that allows us to be in and inhabit all these different roles in our life without losing our sense of self because of the profundity, the significance, the importance of these other dimensions of who we are. So there's no other myth that I know of that so painfully, poignantly, and beautifully holds that complex possibility. So that's so a good portion of the book is really working with the myth in order to illuminate the psychological potentialities that it points to in relationship to the core. And last thing I just want to say is it then also helps us disrupt, Annalisa, the point that you made, disrupt this very old pattern in our thinking that to be virgin means to be untouched. No, the psychological and archetypal view is that to be virgin means to develop this inner knowing, this inner relationship to who we are in the midst of all of the, we could say, touching that life demands of us and that we want, right? We want. Right. So it's not, and so that perhaps also points, to be in touch with the core is not to be in some static state of purity. To be in touch with the core can be something that we move in and out of every day. Like, those of us, whatever our own private psycho-spiritual practices are, whether you in the morning turn to your journal and write your dreams down, or you engage in ritual, or you go for a walk on your own. I mean, any of these moments with that quality of consciousness that says, I need to come back to me and what it is that's going on for me, that's touching into that virgin ground.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just reflecting in my mind, like, there's something so beautiful about losing ourselves in like a erotic or an intimate encounter, or the oneness of, encountering this beautiful scene in nature, maybe a sunrise or a sunset. But what I'm hearing and feeling inside of me as you're speaking is there's also something of coming back to ourselves, of this source of
Yes.
renewal, of yes, there can be emerging and a losing ourselves, but it's also just as important to find that sense of self and wholeness and renewal within inside of ourselves, and create
Right.
that sense of independence and interdependence,
That's right. That's
right.
absolutely right.
And getting
Yeah.
in touch with that sense of Corey as you're speaking to it, it allows us to find that place of renewal, or develop it or cultivate it within ourselves.
And to
Totally.
jump onto that additional, as well as both, and right. what you speak to in the book about how that sense of core continues to develop and grow and strengthen with the more life experience you have, right? And the more sovereignty you're able to develop, I guess with what you would call, I guess we should not be old until we're wise, right? But the development of some level of wisdom, or even just depth of experience, that this archetypal field, or the embodiment of this archetypal energy, is not static. It's not one thing.
That's right. That's right. Like it's not something where, as I talked about a little bit ago, like it's not available to us at only one time in our life. See that again, I think if we think that way, I think that's perhaps revealing something of our kind of biological fantasy. Like I was only Corey when I was a young girl, and then all this stuff in my life happened, and I can never be there again. Well, no, not in the literal, like historical time dimension, but as a psychological reality, as a spiritual principle, as a quality of presence, and qualities and values that we bring in relationship to our life. That's available to us at any time. Um,
And
you
that's
know,
quite liberating. I just want to jump in
well,
and say that's extremely liberating.
yeah, well, yes, I think we, I think, well, I was going to say, I think this is one of the incredible um, um, gifts of the Jungian and archetypal perspective, is that it loosens our sort of concretistic um, and chronological notions of who we are. And instead, much like reading Jung, we're cycling and spiraling and circumambulating around these profound spiritual values. The core is a spiritual value, just like the mother or the hero or the wise one, right? The lover. They are the things that we spend our life trying to experience, that we need, right? These are profound things. And so to begin to be able to recognize their presence outside of this more static way of thinking, it's liberating. It opens up. To me, it feels profoundly spacious. That the inner world is so much bigger than our consciousness, our conscious kind of ego orientation and self-definition can allow us to recognize. But what we need is, and the language, we need the archetypal imagination to help us recognize where and who is present, in order that we can then begin to discern, oh, like my need to go away without my partner at some point in the next 2 months to be alone. That's the presence of the core calling me.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You know,
Right.
equally, the longing to be partnered with someone and to be able to lose oneself in love. Well, there's, Aphrodite, or, whoever comes to us in that,
It,
carrying that erotic flame.
yeah. Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about it in a sense. She uses different language, but she talks about it in a woman's a essential life pattern of basically retreating into solitude, and then and renewing, and then returning, and that
Right.
it's a pattern, a reflexive pattern of going and coming and going and coming, in order to renew yourself, your sovereignty, your essential self.
That's
Your,
right.
right, so that you can then go back into the world with your well refilled, metaphorically, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and in Greek myth, I mean, it's really interesting that Aphrodite and Hera, two goddesses that in many ways are, I mean, they personify different dimensions of relational orientation, right? Aphrodite and lover, the beloved, the pursuit of the beloved, the whole experience of being enamored and love struck. And Hera shows us a whole different side of relational bonding and the um, principles and commitments that are made to the other and the longing for that. And again, the valuing of that. Even in the Greek tradition, these two goddesses were said to, at some point in the year, retreat from their partner in order to renew their virginity. So again, if we're, again, listening to that as a metaphor, it's exactly what you just named, Andrea, that even those of us whose lives are so relationally oriented, which for many of us that just is, this whole question of being in touch with the virgin wellspring of our nature is always available to us if we are willing to listen, if we are willing to put this in a very mythopoetic way, if we are willing to attend to whether it's Artemis's call in us or Persephone, to pay attention to those presences as well, and to recognize that on some really significant level, the quality of attention and care that we can give to another is always primarily predicated in our capacity to do that for ourselves. So that would be another place that we can recognize that core consciousness, that place of retreat, or let's say the necessity of the ground of retreat. That is such a profoundly significant dimension of the psyche, which again, I think our culture does not necessarily support. There are lots of narratives and that pull us away from that, and I think that is also partly related, perhaps, to something of the deeper shift in the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious, as Jung, described it, is the deep river of life that all humans, all civilizations are connected to. It's like the deepest layer of psychic being. It's part of the fabric of the cosmos itself. It's also where the archetypes conceptually emerge from and live, and which we humans experience personally, give expression to culturally, like we've been talking about. But the particular archetypal values and figures rise and fall in terms of their vitality for expressing what it is that's really alive for people at any given time. And one of the big points in relationship to the core is that the mother, as one of the central images of female identity and the feminine psyche, has been so powerful for millennia. But as Jane Hollister Wheelwright argued, and I think quite convincingly for me, as I discuss in the book, that inner image of the mother as the central sort of ideal by which women are identifying consciously and unconsciously, that's changing. And the core virgin maiden is actually emerging out of the collective unconscious as this new image of the self, as this new, ancient, but at the same time new image that is helping us in a much more complex, in giving us a capacity to hold these more complex dimensions of our nature, but also, see, this is where there's a big difference, where the mother is the one that feeds and gives. It's like, you know, the milk of the, metaphorically, the milk, the good breast, the mother is always available and giving. See, the Kore also shines a light on the necessity of being able to abide one's own interiority without having to please and nurture and make oneself forever available to another. And that to me is really important. I know I realize I just sort of touched on a lot of different things there, but it cohered in my mind. I hope that that made sense
No,
in how I
it
was,
makes
yeah.
sense to me. I just want to just kind of piggyback on that a little bit. I mean, the emergence and the continuing growth of the emergence of the Kore archetypal energy, I think is directly tied to what you know of my work. Obviously, you were my internal reader for my dissertation, but the idea of that I've proposed that there's a whole new life stage that's emerged for women that I call
Right.
Regency, which is about being sovereign over your own life, the regent holding the seat of power for her wise woman to come, or crone, whatever you want to call about it, in terms of growth, but that this new life stage that we now have entire generational cohorts of women living into, which has never happened before. And all and many, I would even go so far as to say most of the women who are moving into this new 20 to 30 year life stage are looking to rediscover their core, to reconnect with their core
Right.
in this time when it's the post mothering, right? It's the post first or second career. It's the post estrogen instinct dominated to care for others time, right? And so it makes perfect sense to me that these are going hand in glove.
In addition to that, there's a whole cohort of women who have chosen not to become biological mothers, who are, elder millennials, Gen X, who may have mothering qualities, they may do that in their own way. But I think I'm speaking to many women who are looking for these kind of myth models that haven't seemed to really cohesively appeared in the collective conversation, where I think that the core is exactly what you're speaking to. It's like the hidden goddess arriving at the right time. So it seems that, to circle it back to where we began, this kind of hidden quality is no longer needing to be hidden because the energy, the rise of the energy is compelling it, emerging into the conscious.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Annalisa. I have to say that, over since the book was published and the emails and conversations I've had with people, I think for me, what has been some of the most moving experiences and sharings that people have given me has been those women who didn't who chose not to have children, didn't want to have children, and really carried a kind of shame around it, and they're encountering this idea, this archetypal figure, and then all these different goddesses that then bring that out into really particular ways. I'm very moved just thinking about it, that the way they've shared that they felt that something so profound and deep was validated in terms of not a kind of conscious ego choice, but really just true for them, just a truth that so hits up against these sociocultural expectations and pressures and familial values and all of this stuff. And then for them to see that, wait a minute, this is a deep, a deep ancient dimension of being, and that it belongs, that it belongs, and that some of us have been quite powerfully claimed by that particular archetype in our life, and have learned, and are living it, and are learning to navigate and creatively participate with it, for it to no longer carry a kind of the stigma of, being too independent, too fierce, too interested in one's own creative potential, not in literal maternal biological terms, but in terms of ideas and art and whatever. There is I think something was redeemed. And what's redeemed is both the individual lived experience, but also our awareness of this whole archetypal presence. And I just, that's been, I think, the most important piece for me in all of it. Hearing how this is shifting the way women are relating to their own deep nature. And what could be more important than doing something that actually supports that in another person?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, what more could you ask for as a, yeah, as a writer,
Yeah,
as a creative person? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And even, but I also, I don't want to, like, close this down, because even women that are mothers and have been mothers, they long for a relationship to this side of their own nature too, without feeling guilty,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So again, I don't want to, like, put this into a little box, but there are so many different ways in which, and not just women, but men as well. Men too suffer from extraordinary sociocultural pressures of identity.
Mhm.
Their relationship to the virgin ground of their interior nature is just as crucial as it is for women, in different ways, perhaps, but nonetheless, that sense of um, beingness of oneself, independent of what is wanted or expected.
So, as far as how the quarry exists within the male psyche, do you feel like it gets drawn upon in the same way as it does for a woman, or is it a little bit more relational, or is there a an equivalent within the male psyche?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning by listening to the men that have the courage to come to these seminars and, like, tune into this conversation. What I've heard is that for men, it can happen in a number of different ways. That there are women in their lives that really embody the core. And so there is a way in which they're brought into relationship to it through the other, and that might be their sister, or perhaps, a beloved, or another family member, like, the really independent aunt or whatever that is, who really draws that out. But it could also be inner figures, dream figures, right? Um, or, early loves that become dream figures. They become inner figures in the dream world, who also personify this place, um, both in the imagination and memory, but also in the psyche of one's pure essence and the youthfulness and potential that lives within that. But the eternal youth can have a feminine face as well as a masculine face in mythic images. And so it might move in that direction for them. But I think the ground, you know, these values and themes are you know what we want to pay attention to, even if the images by which it comes forth for someone looks different. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Well, Andrea.
Well, Andrea, yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because we're talking about the idea of of either the great mother being the dominant archetype thought of, you know, in terms, you talk about it in the book, in terms of it being exclusionary to the idea of Corey. And then, of course, you, Annalisa, bringing up the choice of many women to not have children, to focus on other creative pursuits, other things in their lives. It just brings me back to the 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 necessary renaming, redefining. It takes me back to Jane Ellen Harrison's work, who says the goddesses reflect the women. The women don't reflect the goddesses.
Mm.
Right. And so looking at redefining maiden, mother, crone, I mean, I took it to maiden, householder, regent, wise woman, but maybe it should be Kore, householder, regent, wise woman, right? Maybe it should be more inclusive that way. But you know, small moves and have to come with greater understanding, obviously, right? In terms of the collective. But I so totally agree with you that the move to the core in the psyche for all generations of women who make all different choices in how they want to live and express their lives, is on the rise. And I just really encourage anyone who's interested in this subject or mythology, or using mythology to reclaim their core essence, to buy the book. It's very, very readable, understandable, and how you bring it through all the different examples. It's such a great read. It's such a great read.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said earlier, Andrea, the way that you also incorporate contemporary literary figures is really helpful in kind of understanding the many variations. So, Dr. Safron, is there anything else, any last words or words of wisdom or ideas that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Or what are you doing next?
Oh,
Yeah.
Or what are you doing next? Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, yeah, I just, if just to say, as you both so kindly already reflected about the book, if people are curious, um, I just, you know, please get the book and dive into it and listen to where you can sense her presence at work in your experience, because she's there. That's the whole notion of these archetypal patterns, that they are at work in us. We just need the eyes to see and the metaphorical ear to hear. So, what's next? I'm currently working on a book on archetypal astrology. So I have a first draft, and so I'm trying to get that shaped. And yeah, so I'm hoping to that will be born into the world sometime next year. So that's my main focus
Can
right
you tell
now.
us a little bit how, as an archetypal astrologer, how you work with, do you work with the traditional birth chart? How do you
Yeah.
work? Yeah.
Yeah. So I work with the birth chart and transits, and approaching the planets as archetypal presences and patterns of the psyche. And my real passion is being able to help people imagine more deeply into their experience, by um, drawing out the mythic figures, the mythic stories that their chart is symbolizing, and helping people imagine into that, and therefore um, discover better, meaningful stories for their experience, to help them understand that their experience is also embedded within these profound movements in nature, as reflected by the planets in the cosmos and in the inner cosmos. So that there's an outer cosmos and an inner cosmos. So my whole approach is very much based on this mythic, archetypal, symbolic way of exploring. In a way, and I know that this would kind of sort of turn people, this can be kind of confusing, but I also like to say that I think one of astrology's greatest gifts is that it can help us ask better questions of ourselves, rather than someone trying to give you an answer about what you should or shouldn't do, or who you are or who you're not. That's not at all what I'm interested in, but finding better questions, more beautiful metaphors, richer stories, and imaginal companions for our life, basically, and you know what it is that we're struggling with and trying to make sense of. So that's kind of my whole thing. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to the next book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, information about Saffron, how you can purchase her books, how you can work with her if you want a reading, that's all in the YouTube text box. So I encourage you to check out her website and all of that. And yeah, again, thank you everybody for joining us. Leave more comments. Please share this with like-minded souls. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next week
See you next
again.
week.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Saffron. It's been
Thank
great
you
to
for
talk
having
with you.
me.
This has been a
Yeah.
pleasure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.